The New Hampshire primary is over, and we actually have election results this time. Senator Bernie Sanders, he moves ahead to the Nevada caucuses victorious, with Mayor Pete Buttigieg and Senator Amy Klobuchar in the second and third spots.
Joining us via Skype with her analysis is Hill reporter Julia Manchester. She is still on the ground in New Hampshire. Great to see you, Julia.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Julia.
All right, where were you last night? What can you tell us about what you saw?
So I was with Pete Buttigieg's campaign in Nashua at their results party, and it was very interesting. Pete Buttigieg eventually came out to address the crowd, which was very excited and pumped up ahead of the very narrowing race around 11 p.m. But as he was addressing the crowd, NBC News and ABC News and the Associated Press called the race for Sanders. However, we're still seeing that Buttigieg's camp is still very fired up from New Hampshire. They're claiming that they closed the gap, really, and they finished close enough to Sanders that they are saying they were at least successful in New Hampshire.
So, Julia, a lot of eyebrows raised whenever he said, quote, that the Senator Sanders had shown a strong showing, not necessarily acknowledging that he got second. What is the path forward for him in Nevada? Do we know how many people that he has on the ground there? Polling we've seen does not, I mean, first of all, we haven't had a real public poll out of Nevada in quite some time. But what does, it hasn't looked good for him in the past. What's his strategy?
Right. This is where it's going to be a tougher uphill climb for Pete Buttigieg. Remember, Iowa and New Hampshire are majority white states. We know that a lot of Pete Buttigieg's support, the majority of his support, are from white voters. So going into Nevada and South Carolina, he's going to have an uphill climb, and he probably doesn't have the same infrastructure he's had in Iowa and New Hampshire. So we're going to see him travel there tonight. He's going to spend quite a bit of his the next couple of days on the ground in Nevada, but you're going to see him taking a lot more tougher questions about his record as South Bend, Indiana mayor, his record with the police department under him as mayor. So it's going to get a bit tougher for him, and it'll be interesting to see how Biden factors into this as well. The Biden camp is definitely banking on wins, or at least strong showings, in Nevada and South Carolina. So it'll be interesting to see if that moderate lane is at all affected by this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, very interesting decision from Joe Biden last night to leave the state before the results even started coming in, and not to go to Nevada, the next state on the list, but to go all the way to South Carolina. What did you make of that decision, Julia?
So you guys probably saw the event that Biden was speaking at. He looked visibly happier at that event. I was following him around in New Hampshire a bit, and I could tell there was a mood change when I saw him in South Carolina. And if you saw that event in South Carolina, it was like a victory party. You had a number of supporters around him cheering with signs and such. So if you didn't know what was happening in New Hampshire, you probably would have assumed it was a bit of a victory party for Biden. But he went where he was more comfortable, where he is hoping to get a win. You know, the Biden campaign has a different strategy than we've really ever seen before in the Democratic primary, by essentially banking on one state, and maybe Nevada as well, because we know that Biden has really put his eggs in that South Carolina basket, in particular with the African American vote there. The potential problem with that there, though, is that coming out of Iowa and New Hampshire, a candidate needs to have momentum. They need to prove that they have that momentum to voters. So there is a chance that a lot of voters on the ground in South Carolina and Nevada, who maybe were going to support Biden originally, could be scratching their heads and looking around in the candidate pool.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And we saw that in Biden's speech yesterday. He said, it ain't over yet. He said he won't let cable news pundits erase him from the race. I mean, but like you said, when you show fourth and a fifth place finish in the first two contests, it's not a good look to a lot of voters out there.
President, he should be doing better. He has this universal name recognition. At a number of these events that I followed him around at, he was definitely lowering these expectations in New Hampshire. And, it would have been one thing if he got second, maybe third, but you're finishing so far behind, and you're already attached to a figure in the Democratic Party, Barack Obama, that's already universally so popular. So it's very, I think we're a little confused as to why he hasn't done better as a former vice president from a very popular administration.
Yeah, well, and it's really, his whole case has been electability. And
Yeah.
if you're making the case you're the guy to win elections, you kind of got to win some elections. Julia, I also wanted to ask you, though, about turnout. One of the stories that came out of Iowa was turnout was not what Democrats were hoping for. There were also other problems in Iowa. That was probably the least of them, to be honest with you. New Hampshire, though, looks like a very different story. What do we know about who came out and what the numbers were?
Yeah, we're seeing turnout in New Hampshire was obviously much higher than Iowa. And in terms of the kinds of voters that were coming out, I think there was a big push, especially by the Sanders and Buttigieg campaigns, to get a lot of college students to come out, younger students to come out and vote for them, a lot of first-time voters. Another thing to keep in mind is New Hampshire is different from Iowa or some of the other early primary and caucus states because they have a number of undeclared voters, probably more undecided independent voters than there are registered Republicans and Democrats in the state. So I talked to a number of voters actually who said, look, I don't know if I'll make my decision until the moment I walk into the ballot box. So I think it was down the line for a lot of these voters.
Yeah, it certainly did. And that actually does not help somebody like Joe Biden, who concedes the race effectively in the debate. It does help an Amy Klobuchar, who got that last-minute bump. That was enough to put her up into third place and effectively crush Elizabeth Warren's campaign. It was pretty remarkable, huh?
Yeah. Absolutely, very remarkable. I mean, let's remember Bernie Sanders had a home field advantage because he's from Vermont, but so did Elizabeth. You would have thought Elizabeth Warren did as well because she's from she represents neighboring Massachusetts. So her finish here, also like Biden's, is very poor. So we'll have to wonder where her campaign really picks up the pieces from here.
Well, and just talk a little bit more about that, because there was a time when Elizabeth Warren was leading in this state. The demographics are pretty good for her. She does have that home state advantage that is supposedly, meant to mean so much, at least according to the pundits. What happened? How did things fall apart for her so quickly?
Yeah, I think it has to do a lot with, Senator Sanders, his support being so consistent and maybe surging in the last couple of months. I think he was able to draw more of that. A lot of progressive voters were maybe a little torn between Sanders and Warren. And once Sanders started surging and doing a little bit better in the polls, they probably went along with him. At the same time, though, I did talk to a number of voters who were said they liked Elizabeth Warren, but they also liked a Pete Buttigieg or an Amy Klobuchar. So I think there were a number of candidates that, definitely surprised voters and kind of got their attention. I mean, Amy Klobuchar in particular, when I talked to voters about her, one thing they consistently brought up was her debate performance on Friday night. Her campaign raised $3 million since that debate and really banked on that debate performance. So it kind of shows that sometimes these debates do have somewhat of an impact.
Yeah, certainly.
Certainly did this time. Thanks, Julia.
Thanks, guys.
Next on Rising, Progressive Change Campaign Committee co-founder Adam Green. He describes the potential next steps for the Warren campaign. That's next.